Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to Comic Book Nostalgia. I'm CB Nostalgia, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that DC 10-year plan. Well, yesterday was a pretty big day for fans of the DC Films universe. Now recently, we've got a stint of bad news, but we found out yesterday during the earnings call for Warner Bros. Discovery that a 10-year plan is indeed in place, and more importantly, Alan Horn is going to head up that project. This has made a lot of fans hopeful because Horn was at the controls with Kevin Feige during the rise of the MCU, so hopefully this brings us some positive results. But this does beg the question, what is this 10-year plan and how does it? What is this 10-year plan and how will it work? Well, there's already a lot of pieces in place, and this creates some unique challenges for Warner Bros. And the newly minted DC Studios. Now, the current incarnation of DC Films really kicked off in 2013 with Man of Steel, and is leading all the way to this year with Fury of the Gods and Black Adam. There is so much content that's part of the DCEU. But to be fair, it often feels a bit fragmented. Ayer's Suicide Squad came early, but the James Gunn film feels kinda like a soft reboot. Some movies are lightly tied in, some movies are in a new universe completely, like the Batman. Then there's the Cable stuff that's in-universe like Peacemaker, and out-of-universe like Titans or Doom Patrol. So how exactly does DC get everyone in the same place at the same time and make it work cohesively? Well, if you know DC Comics, you know there's a couple of options here. A few years ago, the CW did a DC Crisis event, and although that universe is now defunct, it did work rather well to align their properties and kind of reboot their TV universe. Their TV universe was also very robust, and the possibilities of this happening on the big screen are big. But the real question is how and whether they would like to go to that main DC event right out of the gate. The DCEU has a lot of established characters, and this really is their problem. They have done a really great job connecting these characters to fans, and in many cases, these faces are the faces of those characters. A full-on reboot would not only be difficult, but very painful, and would probably cause a massive backlash and hurt the DC brand in a way Zaslav has made it very clear he wants to avoid. So, what can they do? Well, I would say they need to look to the comics. The DC Comics have fixed continuity confusion a few times with various events. And then sometimes they create new confusion, but that's another issue. They need to bring all of these characters together on the same page in a way that doesn't feel too forced, makes sense, and ultimately, and most importantly, is met by fans with a positive reception. So, how do they do this? Well, they might need to look to a comic event that wasn't actually met too positively, and that would be the New 52. Now, I hear you screaming because the New 52 was a bit of a mess, and it doesn't seem like the place to go, but just hear me out for a second. Now, in case you didn't know, the New 52 was an event by DC Comics to basically reboot the DC Comics universe after the Flashpoint event. To say it was met with mixed responses would be an understatement. Quite honestly, fans seem to mostly hate it, but the framework of the New 52 is what we really need to look to. Now, I really doubt the studio will actually call it the New 52 because of the response, but it is a unique way to realign the universe, put everybody on the same page, and make any painful but needed recastings that are required. We all know Ezra Miller is done after The Flash, and I suspect his recasting will serve as the base for potentially others, the return of some actors, and some resolution to fan demands. This, I believe, could be the path to see the return of some actors, specifically Ben Affleck, Henry Cavill, and maybe even Ray Fisher after Hamada's departure. This would also totally explain why Warner Bros. Discovery and Zaslav seem so committed to releasing The Flash. Despite all the negativity surrounding Ezra Miller, they may very well need this project to go through in order to facilitate all of these changes. Now, the New 52 actually kicked off with a big team-up event, and I'm wondering if that's what they'll do. Now, I don't expect a full-on Justice League War event, but probably something similar in story, but unique. They are looking to Marvel Studios for their inspiration, and Marvel has had several event films that differed greatly from the comics, but totally worked. Civil War and Age of Ultron were mostly in name only, and the upcoming Secret Wars event will clearly be different, focusing on Kang instead of Doom or the Beyonder. This would actually work very nicely for DC. Whatever this event turns out to be, DC needs to position themselves to take those core 7 or so characters, put them together, give them a new shine, new direction, and new leadership. And if they can deliver on that fact, fans would almost immediately gather and support it, especially if all sides win. Giving one contingent of fans that cohesive DC universe they really want is a big deal, and at the same time, they can maintain the legacy of many Zack Snyder characters that will remain in the universe and can move forward within this new framework. This means a full reboot is very unlikely, and I do think it will be somewhat of a soft universe reboot, like keeping many of those familiar faces just like they did in the comics. Now, the question here ends up being where Matt Reeves' Batverse fits in, and I'm pretty unsure of that one. Pattinson is not signed for several films, and isn't expected to don the cowl again until the sequel in a few years, leaving the Batman mantle most likely going back to Ben Affleck. I feel pretty good about Ben potentially returning. I always did like his Batman, and his life has made some major positive turns in recent months, so I do think it's possible that he would return for a much bigger role than he would have just a year ago. I think the only downside is Ben is 50 years old, and if this is a 10-year plan, well, that gives us a 60-year-old Batman. People were mostly okay with Keaton being an older version of the Batman, but 10 years is a long time for an actor in his 50s, and I'm not sure how you lock him down for that much time. Now, over the next couple of months, we're going to find out a lot from DC Films, and although there are some reports of other films being delayed, I do think everything going on behind the scenes there is probably happening to service this potential soft reboot or realignment of the DC Universe. We're obviously going to have to wait and see what Zaslav and his DC team do. I think the DC Universe might be in really good hands now with Alan Horn. We'll probably need to look to see who he brings onto his team, but I think fans should be pretty excited. Obviously, we're going to follow everything that's part of the DC 10-year plan, so make sure you hit that like and subscribe button to not miss any updates. But until we know more, what do you guys think? How do you feel about the DC Universe doing a sort of soft reboot realignment to bring all of their current characters onto the same page? And what actor is a must-have for this reimagining of the DC Universe? I don't think this works without Henry Cavill. Tell me what you think in the comments below. If you like this video, make sure you hit like, click subscribe, and if you don't ring that bell, you won't get any updates. Peace.